and welcome to Study with Sudhir. This is your digital classroom. My name is T.S. Sudhir and today we are going to be looking at a story from the ISC Class 12 English syllabus, and the story is story number 5, The Story of an Hour, written by Kate Chopin. Now, it's also interesting to know about the author herself. Now, Kate Chopin was actually born as Catherine O'Flaherty and she died in 1904, but what is important about her is that she was acclaimed for her finely crafted short stories, as is very evident in this particular story, and she wrote about over 100 stories. Now, some argue that modern feminism was born on her pages, and one needs to look no further than her story written in 1894, The Story of an Hour. Interestingly, the initial title, the original title of this particular story was The Dream of an Hour. And that's a very interesting title because, as you would realize, that much of it is also perhaps a case of an imagination, perhaps of a wish and aspiration on part of the protagonist, in this case, Mrs. Mallard. Thereafter, when it was republished in 1895 under the title The Story of an Hour. It's basically the story of what happens within an hour, and it's a very dramatic hour where a lot of things actually take place, and something relating to her entire life, the realization dawns upon the protagonist. So that's something which you need to bear in mind also about the protagonist and about the author, and in many senses this story seems to mirror what happened in her own life. So in that sense, one could sense that there would be some kind of an autobiographical element also in this particular story. This particular note, which is there in your textbook, also says Catherine, who was married in 1870, followed the conventional path of a housewife until the untimely death of her husband altered the course of her life. Here also, it's a story within that hour when the news of the husband's death reaches Mrs. Mallard, who is the protagonist of the story, and what happens thereafter. So that is essentially what this story is all about. So we'll go through the story, also explain the different elements of the story, and also look at the themes in the story, right? Okay, now let's begin with the reading of the story. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, afflicted as in she was suffering with a heart problem, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. Now note right in the first paragraph how Kate Chopin has come to the point absolutely straight on without wasting any time at all, because it's a story of an hour, and right at the beginning of the hour, the people who have broken the news, who have conveyed the news of Louis Mallard's husband's death, they have taken extreme care because they are aware of her fragile heart condition, right? It was her sister Josephine, you could call it Josephine or Josephine, that doesn't matter, who told her in broken sentences. That is, care has been taken that you don't kind of convey that your husband is no more in a straight sentence, because that would kind of come as a shock. Also, given her heart condition, her ailment, they are very, very careful that they kind of break the news, convey the news in a very roundabout and slow manner, in veiled hints, give veiled hints almost to prepare the lady for the untimely death of her husband, the news that has to be conveyed. Veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. That is the news which revealed, also concealed at the same time, so that the news is conveyed in a slow manner and not give a shock to Mrs. Mallard. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. So the other person who is there is Mr. Mallard's friend Richards. Okay, it was he who had been in the newspaper office. So he, at least he believes so, that he had got the news from a reliable source at the newspaper office. When intelligence of the railroad disaster, says there has been an accident involving a train and some vehicle on the road, was received, with Brentley Mallard. Brentley Mallard is the name of the husband's name leading the list of killed. So there was a list of people who had been pronounced as dead, killed in that railroad disaster, and Brentley Mallard's name was right on top of that list. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram. So it is not as though Richards had kind of jumped to the conclusion that it is indeed the truth. He had waited for a second confirmation and only then decided to come to the Mallard home in order to convey the tragic news to Mrs. Mallard, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. So he had ensured that he, along with Mrs. Mallard's sister Josephine, would be the ones who would convey the news, because he did not want to leave it to someone who is little less careful, again given the fragile heart condition of Mrs. Mallard, someone who is a less tender, that is less sensitive and less, in the manner of conveying a news, not being very careful about the manner in which the news will be conveyed. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. So there was a difference in the manner in which Mrs. Mallard reacted to the news, that most women actually react in a manner that they are simply unable to take the impact of the tragic news. She wept at once with sudden wild abandonment. She just let loose. She did not go into some kind of a shell, right? And said, no, it cannot happen, refusing to believe what is being conveyed to her. She wept with wild abandonment in her sister's arms. So obviously completely overcome with grief. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone, because tragedy, bereavement is often extremely personal. So at that point in time, you just want to be left alone, and that's how even Mrs. Mallard reacted. She went into her room alone and she would have no one follow her. She did not want anyone to follow her into her room. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. So it was a chair, comfortable, because also it was obviously a chair, an armchair, which Mrs. Mallard was used to occupying. Okay, so that's why the use of the word comfortable. So there was a level of comfort, and it also very comfortable in the manner in which it seated Mrs. Mallard. Into this she sank. Now sank again has two connotations. Sank because of her present mental condition, where she has just received the tragic news of her husband's demise. Also sank in terms of there is a level of comfort with the armchair. Pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. So look at the manner in which the pain of having received the tragic news is being conveyed by the author, that it was a physical exhaustion. The physical exhaustion was also caused by this mental trauma of having heard about her husband's death, and that physical exhaustion haunted her body. It was although it was as if her body did not have any strength anymore, and seemed to reach to her soul. It seemed to permeate into every part of her body. She could see in the open square before her house. So from that open window, she is able to see what lies in front of her house. The tops of trees that were all aquiver with the new spring life. So it is the season of spring. So she is now looking at all the trees that are in the spring bloom. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. So you could see that the air was smelling of rain at that point in time. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. So just look at all the description. It was as if, though something very tragic has happened in her life, life outside was not affected by it. Life outside was as normal, and it was going as if nothing had happened anywhere else. In the street below, a peddler was crying his ware. A peddler as in somebody who is selling his wares, a vendor. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly. It was not a loud and a very clear kind of music, but she could hear someone singing in the distance. Okay, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. So there were a whole lot of sparrows that were also outside her house and essentially creating a lot of chattering kind of noise. So as I said, this is life, talking about the trees, about a vendor, about music, about birds. So life goes on as usual, completely oblivious to what has happened in Mrs. Louis Mallard's life. Okay, there were patches of blue sky. Now this is significant, patches of blue sky, because blue essentially is a color which conveys positivity, it conveys life, showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. So there were blue sky and there were also patches of white clouds, and they were all in some kind of a very vague kind of a pattern. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, again referring to the comfort level of that armchair, quite motionless. She was not moving at all, except when a sob came up to her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dream. So making a comparison between this lady and a child, saying that, just as a child who actually sleeps, goes off to sleep while weeping, actually it seems as though it continues to cry even in its dreams. So similarly, that's the kind of a feeling that Mrs. Mallard is going through. She was young with a fair, calm face. So though we are not given an exact indication of the age, we are told that she is a young woman, obviously. So this is a very untimely kind of a tragedy in her life. With a fair, calm face, it's not as though she's used to kind of, showing a lot of emotion in terms of facial expressions or body language, whose lines bespoke repression. This is important, please mark, and even a certain strength. So what the author Kate Chopin is saying is that the facial the lines on the face, they conveyed a certain repression. Now repression is by who? And as we will learn later on in the story, the repression could be as a part of her own personality. It could also be because of the kind of relationship she shared with her husband, and even a certain strength. So it's almost like an oxymoron. She's talking about lines that conveyed repression and also conveyed a certain kind of strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, as though she was not registering anything at all, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. So she was looking into the far away distance without registering anything. It's a vague, listless look, as though there was nothing going on in her mind. She was just looking at something in the distance and not focused on anything in particular. Okay, but she was looking at those patches of the blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. A suspension of intelligent thought essentially means that at that point in time, she was not thinking of anything intelligent, something which is going to make a lot of sense. She is not thinking ahead in that sense. She was not even reflecting on anything. It was just as if her mind was completely blank at that point in time. Okay, there was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it fearfully. It was as if she was looking at that patch of blue sky and waiting for some kind of inspiration in a sense. And she says there was something coming to her and she was also waiting for it, but fearfully. Fearfully being a crucial word out here, because what is coming to her, she is a little fearful of that, because that kind of indicates a major change in her life, in her mindset, in her way of thinking. And she is fearful because that's not the kind of life that she has led so far as part of her marriage to Bentley Mallard. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name. So she is not able to kind of put her finger on what exactly is this thought that is coming to her, being conveyed through those blue patches of sky, right? It is too subtle, means it's just too vague. Elusive means she's not able to put a finger on it. She's not able to kind of name it. She's not able to understand what exactly it is. But she felt it creeping out of the sky. Now, why the phrase creeping out of the sky? Because creeping is generally a feeling which kind of gives you a bit of an uncomfortable kind of feeling. It gives you discomfort. It's not something which you're used to. It's almost as if there is an insect crawling on your skin. It gives you a feeling of as if something is creeping up your body. So it's not something which she has been used to. So there is a sense of discomfort, and that is what is being referred to when she uses the phrase creeping out of the sky. So that sky is actually reaching out to Mrs. Mallard, right? Almost as if communicating to her, but because she's not used to communicating with these blue patches of sky, she's finding it a bit of a strange kind of an emotion and feels as if it is creeping out of the blue sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that fill the sky. So every element, and look at the kind of different things which have been named here, the sounds, the different organs which kind of react, the different senses is what being spoken about. The sense of sound, the sense of smell as in sense, and the sense of color, the sense of sight that fill the air. So she's kind of through her senses, and it almost kind of conveys that all these years of marriage she had not used her senses in a very dynamic kind of manner, and it was now while she's gone through this extreme tragic moment that she's able to, something has opened up within her, the entire senses have opened up within her, which is enabling her from her own house, from the same armchair which she would have occupied for many times in the past. But now this particular moment is very different because she is able to use her senses in order to communicate with the same blue sky which she would have seen many times in the past, but never communicated in this kind of manner. I hope this is clear. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. So she is kind of, you can almost imagine her to be heaving and breathing deeply. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her two white slender hands would have been. So this is important because she realizes that her senses, because of her senses, the blue sky is conveying something to her. But because earlier also she used the word fearfully, she's scared of the change that it is trying to bring about in her. Okay, so she is almost striving as in she's trying to beat it back with her will. She does not want it because it's not something which is almost against her grain. It's something which is alien to her life so far. So there is something within her that is giving resistance to what the blue sky is trying to convey to her. Okay, so she says, but it is as powerless. At that point in time, her will is as powerless as her two white slender hands would have been. So obviously we have been told that she is not a very strong kind of a lady, frail in that sense. So she says her will is not very strong to resist what the blue sky is trying to convey to her. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. So it's almost something that the universe is trying to control her mind. It's almost conspiring to control her mind and emotions at that point in time. She said it over and over under her breath. So it's almost as if without her knowing, she utters these three words: free, free, free. It comes out of her breath without she even actually realizing it, without she even moving her lips or her tongue. Okay. The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. So once she uttered those three words, free, 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 it's almost as if something changed from within Mrs. Mallard. No longer she was staring at the blue sky in a very blank, vacant kind of manner. There was a look of fear which was there initially. Even that look of fear completely disappeared from her eyes. They in fact now were looking much more brightly and in a more focused and concentrated manner at the blue sky. And now her pulse was beating fast and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. So now it's not as if when you receive a bad news, it's almost as if you go cold, right? Your body feels cold. But now she could feel the warm blood flowing through her arteries and veins. So there was something very magical transformation from inside her that happened, that kind of manifested itself both inside her body and the way in her facial expressions were at that point in time. Now, she did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss a suggestion as trivial. Now, look at the phrase monstrous joy. She was not clear whether it was, the monstrous is something which is seen as something very negative, almost as if it is something evil. But here it is being used as if to convey that this joy was something almost as big, as large, as huge as a monster. So she realized that this feeling of pleasure, of joy, of happiness that was coming into her mind and body and soul was something very huge. It was a major transformation that was taking place inside her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She kind of dismissed that this particular suggestion is not something very serious. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death. She knew that the moment she saw her husband's body, she would weep again. The face that had never looked save with love upon her, that he had always looked at her with a lot of love and affection, fixed and grey and dead. So that kind of, the loving face would now be fixed and grey and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely. But she saw beyond that moment of seeing her husband's body, in death, grey and fixed, she saw she could actually look into the future, into the kind of life that she would lead after her husband is no more. And she opened and spread her arms out to them to welcome. This is a significant transformational moment because she is able to actually make that distinction. That realization has dawned on her through this strange connect that has happened between the universe and Mrs. Mallard while she's sitting on the armchair, that while she does realize that she would actually miss her husband, that she had only love and affection for her late husband, but she was able to see the life that actually beckoned her, the post marriage life. Once she's a widow, what kind of a life beckons her, she was able to see, and that life she saw something extremely positive in it, and she says she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. There would be no one to live for her during those coming years. She would live for herself. This is important because now she says during that life, post her husband's death, she would live for herself. It will not be like she living for her husband, and there wouldn't be any kind of a relationship that she needs to bother about anymore. There would be no powerful will bending her in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. Very significant line, because basically it conveys that in her marriage with Bentley Mallard, out of concern or out of the manner in which their relationship, their equation was there, was actually kind of controlling Louis Mallard to a large extent. Controlling in the sense almost deciding what she should do, what is best for her, what is the kind of things that she should not do, the do's and don'ts. Perhaps because she was suffering from a heart ailment, so it could be also out of a lot of concern. But because of that, this is how Louis Mallard interprets it, that there would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women. She is not talking only about her husband, she is also talking about men and women. So what it could mean? It could also mean that even she had in some way controlled her husband's life. She could also be referring to perhaps her sister Josephine, who also in many senses would have actually been controlling her life and her mind to a large extent. So she says that once her marital status is kind of broken in that sense because of the death of her husband, she would now be herself, completely on her own. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. Illumination is almost referring to enlightenment of some kind. She says that even if the intention was kind, or if the intention was cruel, irrespective of what nature of intention it was, that was still a crime, and that's how she saw it in that moment of enlightenment, in that moment of realization. Okay, and yet she had loved him. And then there is a hyphen, and then she says sometimes. She had loved him sometimes, not all the time. So that kind of indicates that, like in any marriage, there would have been differences between the husband and wife. Often she had not. She says often she had not loved him. Okay, what did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in face of this position of self-assertion, which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? She says now it did not matter whether she loved him or did not love him, because what mattered right now was the fact that she was in a position to assert herself in this newfound freedom, in this life where there is freedom which has been discovered, or it is waiting to assert itself. And that, she believes, is the strongest impulse of her being. Her whole existence is going to be now based on the foundation of this ability, of this freedom, of this independence to be able to assert herself. Free, body and soul, free, she kept whispering. So free in that sense is almost the key word in this particular story. It is the most important word, and it kind of conveys a lot within the story, including the ending, about which we will explain when we get there. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door. So all this is happening inside the room, and now outside the room, Josephine, the sister, was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, because she wants Louis Maillard to hear her, imploring for admission. She is kind of begging her to open the door and let her in, because she is scared that Louis Maillard, in that moment of absolute feeling completely distraught, may do something extreme. So she is feeling scared for her sister. Louis, open the door, I beg, open the door, you will make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louis? For heaven's sake, open the door. So she is asking her to open the door, imploring her, begging her. Go away, I am not making myself ill. No, she was drinking in a very elixir of life through that open window. She says, I am not making myself ill. Why? Because we know that at that point in time, and that's what the author is writing, she was drinking the elixir of life, elixir as in a magic potion of life, through that open window. So that window, the windows have opened. The door may have shut because of the death of her husband. When you say no, when a door shuts, windows open. So it's almost being used in the same sense. The door has shut on her married life, right? But the window has opened, and it is through this window that she has been able to communicate with the universe outside. Her fancy was running riot. Running riot means she was just thinking of all kinds of things. Along those days ahead of her, spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would now be her own. So she was thinking of a completely free life. She breathed a quick prayer. This is important. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. So she now actually prays that I want my life to be long. She doesn't want to die very soon, because she now wants to enjoy the rest of her life free. Okay. And she says only yesterday, the contrast with yesterday, when everything else was normal, she had actually shuddered to think that, oh God, I need to live many more years from now. Okay. She arose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities, what she was imploring from outside. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes. Keyword, please underline. There was a feverish triumph. Again, almost very oxymoronish, because triumph is something your eyes would sparkle, right? What happens when you are running a fever? Your eyes are dull, they are yellow, they are drooping, they convey a sense of being unwell. But here there was a feverish triumph, feverish almost as in conveying something, a very heightened sense of tension within her body, and that is being conveyed through her eyes, and her eyes are also conveying some kind of a victory, triumph. And she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. So her whole body language had changed. It was almost as though she had triumphed in life over something, over her own mind. The victory of Louis Maillard right then when she opens the door is that she has won over her own mind. Her mind so far was transfixed that this is the space within which I need to lead the rest of my life. But now she realized that the boundaries had broken, the walls had broken, and now the entire world was for her to explore on her own free. She clasped her sister's waist and together they descended. So even though there was a sense of discomfort with the men and women controlling their lives, at that point in time she didn't seem to mind, because she had now realized that she is going to be her own person in every sense of the word. So the body language vis-a-vis her sister also conveyed a sense of taking charge. She clasped her sister's waist. It was not Josephine. Otherwise, normally what would happen, the person who is undergoing the tragedy, people would tend to put their arms around her in order to console that person. But no, it was Mrs. Maillard who was actually taking the step to clasp her sister's waist. So that also shows a sense of taking charge. And together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Okay, now comes the twist in the story. Someone was opening the front door with a latchkey right at that moment. It was Bentley Maillard, who entered, a little travel stained, composedly carrying his grip sack and umbrella. So it is Bentley Maillard, who we all thought was dead over the last 55 minutes or so, who actually entered the door. So the thing that I spoke about, the door had reopened again. And what happens when the door reopens? The windows close. We'll come to that. He had been far from the scene of accident. So which means that the information that Richards had got at the newspaper office was wrong. Not just the information, even the second confirmation that he had got was also wrong. Okay. And did not even know there had been one. Bentley Maillard was not even aware there had been this kind of a railroad accident. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, because Josephine lets out this cry of surprise, pleasant surprise, that Bentley Maillard was actually alive in flesh and blood, standing there in front of them. At Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. So Richards immediately kind of tries to stand between the husband and the wife, because he does not want Louis Maillard to suddenly get a shock at the person who she thought was dead for the last 55 minutes or so coming alive. But Richards was too late. When the doctors came, they said she had died. She, as in Louis Maillard, had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. So Louis Maillard, unable to take the shock of Bentley Maillard making a reappearance, and when the doctors came, they said that she had died of heart disease, and this was a heart disease of joy that kills. Okay, so that's the story. So the door opens, the window shuts again, and that's actually the tragedy of Louis Maillard's life, and we'll just come to the story of that. Now, basically looking at the entire story, just to explain the broader points of this particular story. This is a story of a very eventful, a very dramatic 1 hour, into which during which the reader gets a sense of the kind of life that Louis Maillard lived and the tragic twist at the end. Okay, now the story is about, as we seen, Mrs. Maillard getting the news and what happens during the next 55 minutes and the twist at the end. Eventually, the husband's death, we thought, was actually giving her an opportunity to break free, but her own death at the end is almost like a rebirth. Okay, there is also the theme of a loveless marriage, okay, male domination within marriage that we spoke about, the position of women, which makes Louis also wonder about her own identity within her marriage. Okay, now the blue color, the blue sky, I've already mentioned to you, it's about the color of positivity. The moments when she's actually sitting alone on that armchair, the bulk of that 1 hour that she spends almost in a sense communicating with the universe outside, that is what is dominating the mind of Mrs. Maillard, and it also dominates the story. Okay, her initial reaction is of course of obvious grief, that is quite understandable. Also her decision to lock herself up is also very understandable, though it can be interpreted as extreme. Obviously, that's the reason her sister was very concerned. But the realization dawns on both Mrs. Mallard as well as the reader that along with that entire sadness and grief, there is also a sense of independence, of freedom, of exhilaration of sorts that her husband's death has brought to Mrs. Mallard. When she is alone, she begins to realize that she is now an independent woman, and that realization is what kind of perks her up, excites her a lot. And that kind of gives her as a sense into her mental conditioning. What kind of a mind did Louis Mallard actually possess? The kind of upbringing that would have shaped this kind of a personality. Her first reaction to something like this, this feeling that is approaching to possess her, right, is to beat it back with her will that we discussed. And such resistance reveals that her mind saw this kind of a feeling as something that was forbidden. Okay, and when she finally acknowledges that joy, she feels almost possessed with it and she does not want to abandon it. And that's when the word free escapes her lips, because so far Louis' life had not been allowed to embrace this kind of freedom or joy. Okay, and she also realizes that society will also see this as some kind of an extreme, so she must keep it at arm's length. But now she is so overwhelmed with it that she actually prays for a long life. Okay, but when Bentley returns, his return is almost like a return to the same kind of life for Louis. It's almost like turning the clock back by an hour, right? Which is why the title of the story is also very significant and very intelligent in that sense, very clever. So it's almost like the clock has been turned back as far as Louis is concerned. And this shock is obviously too much for her to bear. The doctor, when he says that she died of a heart disease, of joy that kills, interprets it as death because of joy, sudden joy. But what the doctor obviously doesn't know is that Kate Chopin, during that 55 minutes, has given us a glimpse into what the kind of transformation that Mrs. Mallard has undergone, and that her death was actually because of the regret that Bentley Mallard's return marks a return to the same kind of a imprisoned, shackled life of sorts for Louis Mallard. Okay, he's a man who loves her but who also binds her, and that kind of a remorse is too much for her frail heart to bear. Basically what Kate Chopin, and as I said at the beginning that this is also autobiographical in some senses, it basically suggests that all marriages, even the most kind ones, even the most balanced ones, are inherently in some way oppressive, for whatever reason. And she admits that her husband was kind and loving, Bentley Mallard. However, she actually feels joy when she gets the news of his death. And her reaction, the manner in which it has been kind of explained, it does not suggest any kind of malice, it does not kind of convey any kind of evil on her part, right? And she knows that she would actually cry when his funeral is going to take place, when she sees his dead, frail body. However, despite all the love between the husband and wife, between Bentley Mallard and Louis Mallard, Louis actually sees his death as a release from a life of oppression, right? Of course, there is no detail given on how Bentley Mallard was controlling her or oppressing her in many way, but basically she makes a point that marriages in general stifles both men and women. So she's talking about women can stifle a man can stifle women. Okay, in that sense, she sees this kind of a development as freedom for her and even wishes that she should now lead a long life. Okay, she understands the right way for women to behave, but her internal thoughts and feelings are actually anything but politically correct at that point in time. Okay, she does cry dramatically, she immediately breaks down when she hears the tragic news, but it also shows that she was an extremely emotional and perhaps we could say even a very demonstrative kind of a person. Okay, and she also knows that she would grieve for Bentley. It's not as though she did not love him, but she says that her private thoughts, she also sees in her private thoughts and her communication with the universe outside, her communication with the blue sky outside, she sees that there lies some kind of an opportunity to lead a free life. and that's what she says is a more bright way of existence. Okay, the heart trouble that Kate Chopin spoke about right in the first paragraph, the first sentence, it actually suggests that the heart trouble is of course very physical. It's also very emotional in a sense, because why emotional? And that's what we realize through the story. It's emotional because at the heart of the problem, ironically speaking, pun unintended, it's also at the heart of the problem is the relationship that she shares with her husband. Okay, so it's in that sense heart trouble me in a literal sense, also in a emotional kind of sense. And when she hears the news of Brentley Mallard's death, that's when her heart really comes to her own. She knows what her heart really wants. So you understand the various connotations in which heart can also be interpreted in this particular story, and as students of English literature, you are expected to delve into different meanings at the same time in order to understand and appreciate literature that much better. In her room, her heart is actually racing faster, as she makes that kind of a connect with the universe outside. She speaks about body and soul free, right? And that's the kind of statement which kind of conveys that she's embracing this newfound freedom. Okay, only when now, but the twist again comes when Brentley Mallard comes, and that's when the heart trouble comes back, right? And her heart is not able to take his reappearance in that sense, right? Because Brentley's death had given her a glimpse of what life ahead could be like, and when that new life is kind of taken away, the shock and disappointment and not joy kills Louis Mallard, right? Then there is of course that whole thing of crying, that also stays throughout the story, right from the time when the news is broken to her and also in her room. She sobs dramatically when she hears of his death, and she continues to weep when she is alone in her room also, though this particular crying, sobbing is almost very unconscious. It's not a loud dramatic show of tears and of emotions as it was when the news was broken to her. Now that's about the basic different themes of this particular story which I wanted to speak to you about. Also, when you're talking about, and I mentioned this while reading out the story, the birds, the music, the vendor, the trees, everything kind of conveys spring, and it also conveys life, a new life being born, and that is a kind of a metaphor for what is going to happen to Louis Mallard. Okay, and Brentley Mallard at the end finally is obviously completely ignorant, completely oblivious to the entire self-discovery that Louis Mallard has actually undergone in the past 55 minutes. But his re-entry, his reappearance, what's the message that it gives to Louis Mallard, that's also equally significant, that her freedom will actually not become a reality. And that is what dawns on Louis Mallard the moment she sees him entering through the door. And in that sense, death is the only way for Louis Mallard to gain freedom in the real sense of the word. The doctors of course say that she died of joy, but we know that's not true. The doctor doesn't know it's not true because she did not die because she regained the joy of getting her husband back. She died because she actually lost the joy after having tasted it for less than an hour, and that is really the most ironic part of this entire story. I hope you have understood the story in great detail. Please go through the story again, underline the keywords, listen to the explanation, take down notes, and that will ensure that when you are revising it closer to the examinations, whatever examinations follow over the next 1 year, you will be absolutely comfortable with it. Thank you very much for watching.